We'll go right into our presentation about the traffic engineering assistance, please.
Council, thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today and give you a rundown of our TEEP study. My name is Aaron Granquist. I'm a project manager at HR Green, just down the road in Cedar Rapids. So we looked at 2 intersections in the city over the last 6 months or so. It was the West 8th Avenue and Lyndale Drive and the Central Avenue and 10th Street intersections. This is the overview of my relatively short presentation today. I'll talk about the Iowa TEEP program in general, look a little more specifically at the project study areas, look at primary concerns of the study, and then look at crash history, traffic information, operations, and then finally get to the recommendations. So in the engineering world, we like acronyms. So we use the Iowa DOT came up with the TEEP program, which stands for Traffic Engineering Assistance Program. And of course, it's funded by the Iowa DOT. This is intended for cities and counties that don't have the luxury of a in-house traffic engineer. Provides relatively low-cost engineering services. And it will fund up to 100 hours of consultant time. And the purpose of the study is generally to look at cost-effective safety and operational improvements that can happen. So a little more specifically, we looked at these 2 intersections in the city of Marion, West 8th Avenue and Lyndale Drive, and then Central Avenue and 10th Street. Here's a close-up of the 8th Avenue and Lyndale Drive intersection. I'm sure most of you are aware that it's got some unique geometric challenges with some skewed entrance angles and just kind of a non-standard type intersection. And right now it's currently controlled with 2 stop signs at the approaches from West 8th Avenue and Lyndale Drive. To further complicate things, the Grantwood Trail is just south there on Lyndale Drive that has seen enhanced use, and we'll continue to see that as various segments of that trail get constructed. This is the other intersection, Central Avenue and 10th Street. Again, we have some interesting geometric challenges with some skewed angles and kind of offset cross streets there with Central Avenue, 10th Street, and 10th Avenue kind of coming together at that location near the Granger House Museum. So the primary concerns of the study. We looked at intersection control at the 2 intersections. We evaluated potential geometric improvements. And the ultimate goal is to enhance vehicle and pedestrian safety and operations. The timeline was we had a kickoff meeting back in early part of the year, late January. We were able to get started with some of the preliminary activities at that point, but then we got data collection from the city in March of this year. And we were able to take that, do some modeling, look at some alternatives, and turn in a draft report. And then finally, our final report went to the DOT, I think it was June 20th, just a little while ago. So we'll dive into some of the data that was collected. In terms of crash history, we looked at the intersection of West 8th Avenue and Lyndale Drive. We were able to collect information from a 4-year period. There was 12 total crashes over that period, with 4 of them being rear ends and 4 of them being a non-collision single vehicle type, and then a smattering of some other ones. But it's actually a crash rate that's lower than the statewide average. Of course, no crash is a good crash, so we want to be well below that if we can. Turning to Central Avenue and 10th Street crash history. Again, the data was collected over the same 4-year period. A few more crashes at this intersection, 21 versus 12 at the other one. But here we're seeing the predominant type of crashes is the rear end type crash. Here the crash rate is a little bit higher, but again, we're below the statewide average. So this is just the diagram that the traffic engineers like to put together showing the various levels of cars during the morning, noon, and evening peak hours. This is the diagram for West 8th Avenue and Lindale Drive. And as you can imagine, the movement that goes from South Lindale Drive to the eastbound West 8th Avenue and then the opposite direction, that's kind of the predominant movement there. And again, I know these are very small numbers. The report itself, I'm sure, will be clearer to you, and I'm sure the engineering department will be able to provide this report to you upon demand. Then we look at the other intersection. Here we've got, of course, movements in many directions, but the predominant movement is the north-south movement throughout the day, basically. That's almost the number one movement in all three time periods. Again, I'm not going to go over all these numbers, but suffice it to say, we looked at a variety of things. We looked at delay, level of service. We looked at like the length of the queuing or how long the lines are as they wait. And we're able to use standard industry practices to assign what's known as a level of service. And level of service, similar to letter grades, goes from A to F, with F being the worst, A being the best. And generally in an urban setting, believe it or not, level service D is considered acceptable. I don't think my parents would have accepted a D for my grades, but apparently traffic operations have a little bit lower threshold in this industry. But as you can see here, we really don't have a lot of that. There's a little bit at West 8th Avenue and Lindale Drive. We've got some levels of service D in the PM peak with eastbound movements and also the overall. But Central Avenue at 10th and 10th is actually not too bad. You have a C in there, but most of them are A and B, and so it's not too bad. But certainly you can always improve. So now as we move into some report recommendations, as we look at West 8th Avenue and Lindale Drive, in the short term, we think there's some very effective, but also very cost-effective options. Trimming trees to improve site visibility, especially with the increased use of the trail, we think is an option that should be taken at this point. And review and updating the signs at the intersection can also be a short-term fix. And we're talking about a couple $1,000 here to get something done that I think will have some nice enhancements. Long-term, through our kickoff with the engineering department and getting input from them, they did want us to look at a full roundabout at this location, and we think that also should be considered. But it does have a more significant price tag of anywhere between $700,000 and $850,000. Of course, the city of Marion, to a certain extent, has embraced roundabouts, so hopefully you're somewhat familiar with them and willing to consider it. But there's certainly going to be some safety and operational improvements with a roundabout here. This is probably a little bit hard to see on your monitors, and it looks better in the study itself. But this is just a diagram showing how we've laid out a pretty basic roundabout on this intersection using the aerial imagery. And we've also run some of the turning movements of various design vehicles. I think we've got a zoomed-in version here showing even some semis going through there and being able to navigate the roundabout effectively. You can see there will be some minor impacts to some of the adjacent properties, mostly in some small areas, right-of-way acquisition, and then reconfiguring the sidewalks to make sure that pedestrian movements are maintained. Again, more numbers in tabular format. Engineers love that. But basically what we're showing here is that with the full roundabout, the stuff at the rows in white are the existing situation, and the rows in green are with a full roundabout. And you can see, even though you were A's, B's, and C's, currently everything moves to an A with a roundabout. So it's a nice improvement. And what's really nice is the traffic calming aspect of a roundabout will have vehicles be much slower when they're crossing that trail, and I think that's definitely a better situation for pedestrian use of the trail. I should point out that this is based on current traffic information, not like a 20-year projection of increased traffic or anything like that at this point. Unfortunately, that's outside the scope of the TEAP program. Traffic projections are never right anyways. As we look back to Central Avenue and 10th Street, on the short term, we feel like there's some signs that need to be added to the signal mast arms to aid in safety and navigation. Again, very low-cost solution. We also think that we can revise some of the yellow and red clearance times to enhance operations and safety there as well. And again, that's a very, very low-cost short-term improvement. Long-term, through direction from working with the engineering staff, we looked at a mini roundabout here. We felt like a full roundabout was going to have too big of an impact to adjacent properties, so we looked at a mini, and a lot of the same safety and operational benefits of a full-blown roundabout are achieved with a mini roundabout, and they're slightly less expensive. So I put the cost in there of $200,000 to $300,000. This intersection's already signal controlled, so if the desire is actually to maintain a signal control, there's definitely some upgrades to maintain or to achieve ADA compliance that would need to happen, and that includes getting the push buttons in the right locations and improving the sidewalk ramps. Here's a overall diagram of that intersection. It's actually shifted, so north is to the left here, but we tried to model a mini roundabout. Again, it's hard to see there, so I have a zoomed in version here showing a mini roundabout and some turning movements and potential sidewalk configurations, which were obviously done without a lot of input from the adjacent property owners, but something that could happen. And here we look at the operational changes due to implementing the mini roundabout. Like before, the white row is the existing level of services and the various metrics. And then the green row is how those would change with the mini roundabout. And in almost every case, it either stays the same or improves. But there is one situation, and that I've shown there with that little blue arrow, where the northbound PM peak actually goes from a B to a C. I think that's probably due to that the current signal timing probably prefers that movement, and so they're currently have a very nice level of service. But when you put a roundabout in, each leg of the roundabout kind of has its own, or is equally weighted in terms of preference. So that's the only real reduction in level of service through implementing a mini roundabout. But as I mentioned, D's get degrees in traffic engineering, so if we're above a D, we should be in good shape. And with that, I'd be happy to answer questions. I have the full report here, and I will try to do my best if you have any questions.
Just one quick question. When you talk about the West 8th and Lindale,
Yes.
Is a short-term option to improve that, especially as you're coming off Lindale going on to West 8th, is a short-term option to round that off a little bit more? To reduce some of the sharpness.
Yeah, so if I go back to the diagram here, you're talking about which movement?
The southeast corner.
Right.
So as you're coming off Lindale Drive going on to West 8th, I mean, if you're going on it, sometimes if that was more rounded, would that keep more people down to that right side, so somebody coming this way, it doesn't appear, it's more clear that they're heading on West 8th and not going to go across?
That would be, but you'd have a little bit of a trouble with now all of a sudden you're expanding that amount of pavement in that intersection even more. And say for example you were to change that turning movement so that it's a little bit wider radius, you're adding a lot more pavement to that intersection, and studies have shown unless you are constantly painting that to indicate where people go, that actually could increase accidents at the intersection, because with all that pavement, there's very little in the way of directing people where they need to go unless you're constantly painting it. So while you may see an improvement in that particular movement, you may see some unintended, I guess, detriments in other types of operations.
Because I'm talking about doing that without the roundabout.
Yeah,
okay.
And I mean even without the roundabout, now all of a sudden you've got a lot more pavement.
Okay.
The benefit of the roundabout is you have that center island, of course, that helps to direct people where they need to go. That's a good question, though. that's very intuitive, definitely. You wouldn't think that, providing all that pavement would cause other issues, but
No.
studies have shown.
Wouldn't that increase speed too, more pavement?
Generally, when you have a longer radius, but of course that movement is, at least when you're coming from the west and making that right-hand turn, there's a stop sign there, of course. It might increase speed for people taking a left coming from the south, though, if there's a wider or a longer radius there. So that could be an unintended consequence of that as well.
I think I think we all have gotten those phone calls. I know I have, as far as the visibility, blind spots going to the east. There's frequently there's a transit bus that stops just about where that visual aid is there, and that does create a little bit of confusion. But I thought the same thing too right away.
So where does you said there's a bus that stops?
Yeah, there's one. I don't know if it's an ATS bus or, because I've witnessed it myself, about where that purple visual aid is, just to the east. If you keep going to the east, where your image of the vehicle would be right there. Yep, right there is
right
where.
About there, huh?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if that's an unexpected stop or an unscheduled stop, and they just happen to stop there. But you can imagine the flow of traffic going through that direction, and all of a sudden they have to brake quickly because it is kind of a blind spot. But
oh yeah, and if they're not really looking at a 90, they're kind of looking way behind them, and all of a sudden
there's just
obstruction in the way.
Like we've all witnessed, there's just a lot going on at that intersection. So
yes, definitely.
Any other questions for Aaron?
With the roundabout in that location, can that be shifted more southeast?
There could be a variety of alternatives to look at. I think this is really just a kind of a quick one. Again, we only get 100 hours, and as you can imagine, laying out a roundabout takes a lot of time. So we did this quick and dirty. But yeah, there could definitely be some shifting of this alignment to lessen the impacts to the other quadrants of that intersection, and maybe still come up with a good solution. Hopefully, if you get additional funding and decide to move forward with that, the next designer could come up with something good for you.
Yeah, I think the problem that exists now might still exist with a roundabout, and that is cars that are on West 8th Avenue going to the east and cars coming south on Lindale Drive, where there's 2 stop signs now. That's going to be, the guy coming on Lindale Drive south has to give right-of-way to the guy on West 8th Avenue going into the roundabout, plus he has to give anybody to his left right-of-way in the roundabout. That's going to take a lot of learning.
Well, typically with roundabouts, you would not want to keep those stop signs there. And in fact, that would create an issue that you would have to be looking in both directions.
I understand that, but I'm saying if 2 cars meet there, one going south and one going to the east on West 8th Avenue, not on Lindale Drive. The guy coming south on Lindale Drive has got to give the right-of-way to the guy going east on West 8th Avenue.
Well, it all depends on who gets in the roundabout first. You're supposed to yield to who's ever in the roundabout first. And, if they're going to be entering, several dozen feet away from each other, so maybe they could even both get in at the same time and they won't really conflict with each other. But certainly roundabouts do take a fair amount of learning to negotiate. But luckily, the severity and types of accidents that occur with roundabouts are much less. So
I think it's a good idea. We just got to figure out if it work,
Yeah. I think as part of any project like this, which I know you've done in the past, public outreach and getting people to learn how they operate and how to negotiate them effectively is definitely a thing I would recommend.
Do you find roundabouts being a little less effective in intersections like these 2 are, where you've got the geometric layouts where everything's not at 90 degree?
Well, because you're kind of trying to get cars to negotiate curves, which has a traffic calming effect, it honestly works. It's a very good situation for these types of situations where the geometrics are so weird. But you got to really be careful that you're not creating a situation where they can cut the corner, so to speak, and keep their speed up,
Yeah.
which, in this particular case, if the circle is shifted like it's shown now, as you're coming through and going from Lindale northbound onto eastbound west, if you don't design that right, you could kind of cut the corner or cut the curve and keep their speeds up, and you certainly don't want to do that, because that is the primary movement too, at least based on the current traffic data.
All right. Thank you very much, Aaron.
Okay, thank you very much.
That.
Appreciate it.
Looks like that's going to be a lot of great information for us to work with. Seeing nothing start in finance, we'll move over to public services.
Okay, Your Honor. We're going to start, 1 and 2 are kind of the same thing when we briefly discussed these at a work session here to discuss our projects at public service. What I'd like to talk to the council today about and give them an update is our new construction program for the maintenance facility at public service. We're getting to the point we're going to have to make some decisions on some design standards, and with that also how we're going to do some of the financing structure. So if the council remembers, we discussed this about 6 weeks back during the work session. We're looking at introducing a lot of the renewable attributes into this facility as well as the eco-industrial park. The building itself is rather large. As the council remembers, what we're proposing is about a structure that's over 140,000 square feet. So obviously when we're looking at the mechanisms that include the lighting systems, the HVAC systems, we want to do our due diligence in making sure we get those right. If we don't get those right, we're going to pay a lot of money for those down the road in maintenance and utility fees. And so one thing we're doing with this facility, we have enlisted the project with they call it the new construction program. And basically what that is, Alliance and Mid-Am pay for us to do this study. And they take our current designs, facility designs, and then run models with this. And the purpose of running these models is to make choices based upon the information that's in this document. Those choices include things from the type of insulation systems, the building envelope, lighting systems, as well as our HVAC systems, which I'm really going to get into here. And so when we're doing this study, they take everything into account, our entire building envelope, the glazing, lighting, things of that nature. And so as we move forward with this study, we gave them a couple different options to look for. And you got a copy of this study in your council packet. And I'm going to explain this because it does get a little complex. Yeah, it does. And so we spent a lot of time looking at our HVAC options. And we'll start with these. And it'll get easier to understand as we get going. So we had 3 different bundles that we put in the design mechanisms. The first bundle to heat and cool the facility included a natural gas boiler with radiant floor heat, and then just a traditional conventional forced air conditioning system within the office. And I'll go to more detail with these here in a second. The second bundle, bundle 4 in the yellow, that included a natural gas boiler that heated the shop, and then also a geothermal system just to heat and cool the office space up front. Okay? And then the third option, which we didn't think was even feasible, was a new type of geothermal system. And that's essentially a geothermal system that would run the entire facility. We didn't think it was feasible at the time. We didn't even want to waste our time with it, but we went ahead and submitted that regardless. And so when they did the energy modeling, we gave them a design scenario. And this is it. This is a different way that we were proposing to heat and cool the facility in order to see if we could save some money in doing so. And so what you see here is a diagram, and basically that diagram is a underground tubing diagram. And that's what we call the radiant floor heating and cooling system. Typically, a radiant floor heating system is very common that heats the slab with underwater with tubes inside the concrete. What our mechanical engineers are proposing to do is heat and cool the facility through the slab, coupled with a geothermal system. Not a lot of people have done this. And so they took this model, which is very feasible, and they ran that. The White group out of Minnesota ran that model. And then we got the energy results here, which I'm going to go over with the council. And so the first scenario here, that was the most energy intensive use. That was the first bundle I showed you. The second scenario had the geothermal system coupled with the shop, the natural gas shop. And then the third system, this is our geothermal system here. That was the least amount of energy use that we saw in the whole facility. And this is where it got interesting. And so these three bundles, I'll go over them again here. The first bundle was a conventional system that we're looking at introducing. And these, if we went with a high efficiency system, that's the cost savings we would realize each year on an annual basis. This is the upfront cost of incorporating that system. Here's our rebate from the utilities. And another thing, what this study does, it programs our potential rebates. And then that's our annual energy costs of the facility each year, $117,000, just over that. Bundle 4, this yellow bundle, that's having the geothermal system coupled to the office only, than with the conventional systems in the shop. That would be our energy cost savings annually. And then if you go down here, that's the proposed capital cost, and then that would be the potential rebate we get back from the utility, just over $100,000, $126,000. And then that's our energy cost each year, $110,000. That's what it costs to run the system. Bundle 7, that's the new geothermal system that we're proposing. Here's our annual energy cost savings, $209,000 per year. At least that's what they're assuming. Incremental first cost, they had that close to $1.6 million. We're finding out it doesn't cost that much to do that. We actually went out and got bids to do this system. And then the rebate we would get back from the utilities is just over three and a quarter, about $324,000 is what the utilities would give back to us. And then this was interesting. That would be our cost to run the facility each year. What we found out, though, is that we made a mistake when we submitted these. That actually would not be the cost to run the facility, because that is heating and cooling the entire facility. That's heating and cooling the entire shop. So they're going to come back in the next report, and we're going to subtract about 100,000 square feet of cooling off of that. And so by doing that, they indicated that cost will be well under half. Does that make sense? And so we're looking at half of that, because we're really not going to air condition our shop. The entire parking structure, if you're at public service, we got a shop back there, we don't air condition that. And so by incorporating that model that we did, they assumed that we would air condition. So no, we're not going to air condition that. So our annual costs drop well below 60,000, probably closer to 48,000 is where they think it is. So a substantial amount of money that we'd save year in and year out compared to a conventional system, as you can see here. That makes sense. It's a little confusing at first. It took us a while to digest that. But as I said, that last bundle there, that geothermal system, I'll show you here, that's incorporating a design that both heats and cools the facility through the slab. Does that make sense? So this zone here will not be operational during the summertime. We're not going to air condition the facility. Any questions so far?
Can you explain the baseline annual energy cost line on why bundle 7 is so much higher than
Yes,
one?
I can. And so when we put that model together, they based that off of heating and cooling the entire facility through conventional equipment. That makes sense?
Oh, okay. So actually, that number needs to be adjusted too.
That needs to be adjusted.
So they both need to be adjusted.
This isn't really accurate, because this is saying this is a conventional system.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
But when they ran this model, now what they warned us, they said, when we're ready to submit this to utilities, and we've already talked to the utilities, we're going to want to keep this number because we want that rebate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I'm kind of roughing out numbers here on what's
Yes.
the payback? How many
Payback's
years is
gonna
the
be- okay.
payback? And I can't figure it out on number 7
Payback,
with those changes.
payback schedule is about right here.
Oh, you got,
So-
I just, it's.
Yeah,
it's
and
there
so we're
already.
going to look at closer to a 5 to 6 year payback at running
Got it.
that.
Okay.
And so when we get the final report back, we'll go ahead and provide those numbers. And so I want to bring the council up to speed because, item number 2, we need to bring on a mechanical engineer to finalize these numbers.
Got it.
Yep. So, any questions on that?
Ryan, do we have anywhere in here, just from my experience, from my industry, do we have any understanding on the geothermal process and the elements, even though the payback on that is 6.1 versus 10, do we have any hypothetical hiccups that might create
Yes.
expensive repairs premature?
Yes.
You've got it, very
Yep.
good, okay.
And so part of this process, and we didn't want to get too far ahead of ourselves with this. When we saw this, we saw a great opportunity, and I'll get to that part here soon. We had some goals here when doing this project. We wanted to see, could we really build a building that could function off of renewables? Could we essentially get this on solar or on wind? And this is now very feasible to do that. And so before we did anything else, after we got these numbers, we did this analysis. And so this analysis, you need to do this. And this is not only a thermal conductivity analysis, but it's also analysis that we're going to, for the lifespan of the equipment, the loops and whatnot, not only, but as well as the heat pumps. And so the first thing we did, we conducted this analysis. We had to find out whether or not we could actually do this on site. You're looking at a massive geothermal field, over 300 tons of geothermal loops going into the ground. There's a specific way they have to go into the soil. They horizontally bore these. And I can tell you right now, a lot of people that do geothermal on a big commercial scale, they don't do this test, and that's a huge mistake. And so the part of this test is doing a soil sample and actually boring in some loops and actually doing a test of how good the soil is, do an actual conductivity test to make sure that that system will work. Not only that, but also they see how much room we got to work. So that was the first step. Second step, they do an analysis, a lifespan analysis.
So this would be totally a horizontal field, no vertical?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, everything's in loops. There's no open loops or anything like that. And so there's not many loops of this scale in the Midwest. There's only a couple. And so this is really what we had to find out. Is it feasible? And right now they're coming back saying, yes, absolutely, it's feasible. We could do this. It's a very, very large geothermal project. And so that's part of the analysis that we're getting done. If anybody wants a copy of these test results, I'd be happy to provide them. So that was the first step. The second thing is we're going to classify this as an essential facility. After sitting down the building and fire, we thought that was a good thing to do. What that means is that we're looking at hardening this facility. By doing that, we don't have any external components. We don't have compressors outside. Everything's underground. All our units are inside a hardened structure. So that's another reason why we looked at that. We like that idea in the fact that all the compressors and things of that nature are all protected out of the elements. And then with that study, we also did a life cycle study on all the equipment. So after we got this back, the one thing we had to get with was the Army Corps of Engineers saying, hey, we're going to have any issues. Down here in this hatched area, that's all wetland. That's been recognized. We had to make sure we could go into the wetlands with the loops. They gave us the permission to do so. And so now that's what we're looking at, and that's probably the direction we're going to recommend going forward right now.
So they had no concerns with that?
And no concerns. Yep.
Would we have to mitigate any of that, or?
Nope. Nope. All done. Yep. So that's where we're at with that process, and so we're very intrigued with doing this, and that's why we're going to request the council go ahead and approve number 2. That's the contract with our mechanical engineer. They have a lot of history in doing these large of a systems, and they're also the ones that designed that radiant cooling slab. Not a lot of people do that, so they have a lot of experience in doing that. And so that's kind of the situation we're in right now. We'd like to move forward with this. With that, with this information, if the council's comfortable, the white group is going to go ahead and do another analysis, get that back, and that's really going to tighten down what our payback's going to be. But at a minimum, we're looking at a very aggressive payback over the next 5 to 6 years. And then if the council wants to, this would also give us the opportunity to essentially get that building off the grid if we wanted to.
What about maintenance on something like that over the years?
The good question. The loops are very low maintenance. There's not much you have to do to them. That's something we did investigate in. There is a maintenance program that we put that into. Obviously, we put that into. The only things you really have to maintain are what they call the compressors or the geothermal chillers, actually units that run the geothermal and the pumps. Maintenance is very comparable to a conventional system. There's really not a lot of difference.
Cost-wise, you mean?
Cost-wise, no.
What about so you're talking about the tubes under the floor in the shop?
We have that now, the radiant floor heating, and there's really no maintenance with those. Yep.
How long have they been in place in the shop now?
We put that in 2004. Yeah. You put them in right, they're there for the lifespan of the building. Yep.
So Ryan, in your memo, you said the staff solicited 5 proposals,
Yes, we did.
and then you're recommending A and J.
Yep.
Is that because of their?
They're the only ones who could find that even would have that type of experience to do something like this. And that they're very accustomed to geothermal. One project that this would compare to is the school district in West Liberty. Is that right? The school district in West Liberty at one time had the largest geothermal system, I believe, in the country, and a 300-ton system. And that's comparable to that. They're the ones that did that. And that was a very successful project. And so we've also went to similar type of buildings, conveyor engineers down in Cedar Rapids. They did the HVAC design for them, same type of systems they incorporated. And so we're recommending them by far. They were the only ones that really could handle this type of system.
So I like the payback. So where do you see any risk with this system? Where's the risk?
The only risk you run into, and I'll be honest with you, is when you go to construct a geothermal loop field. A lot of people don't do that test. I don't want to point fingers, but there's a lot of people that did geothermal in this city and did not do that test. And so I'll give you an example. If you don't do that test, you don't know what type of soil composition you have, you're going to end up spending more money either on utilities or you're going to end up spending more money trying to get more loops in the ground. By doing that test, we've mitigated the risk on actually how big that loop field is. From that point on, there's not a lot of risk from this point. It's a very conventional system.
That loop field, would it accommodate any expansions or changes in the future? Are we in the middle or on the high end of the capacity of that?
We're on the mid-tier of capacity there. Being that we found out wetlands are a perfect place to do a geothermal field. That's because of soil conductivity. It's wet, things like that. Our test results, which I can show you. I got that here. I can show you sometime, but they came back very high compared to most places. And so we were very pleased to see that. And so before we even wanted to bring this in front of the council to show you what direction we're going to go, we had to make sure it worked.
I'm excited to see somebody from the upper Midwest that's used to our climate engineering such a project. So excellent. Any other questions on that particular one for Ryan?
No.
Nope. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So that takes care of number 1 and number 2. Start under public services. We'll move on to the police department.
Or we could skip them and make them wait longer. No. Nobody laughed. They're all serious out there.
Right? My boss is over here. I gotta impress him. All right. Good afternoon. Joe McHale, Marion Police Chief. It's an honor to be before council tonight. Our best to Mayor Abu Asli and his family today. I've got a lot of my executive staff here tonight supporting the presentation of our strategic plan This is a big moment for the Marion Police Department. This is a big step for us to take for not only for now, but for setting this department up for future generations to make sure that it's strong and supporting our community the way the community expects. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to give you a 30,000-foot view of Marion's strategic plan, and I'm going to outline a process that's going to take us about the next 3 months at council. We're going to take small bites with you, tear it apart, pick it in small pieces so you can digest it. But I just want you to know that we put a lot of effort into this, a lot of effort from the top to the bottom. And I'll introduce my working group later in the presentation. But we had a lot of outside help, a lot of very high quality outside help in putting it together. And I left a big stack of papers over on y'all's left over there. If you want to flip through it, I mean, it was days and days of work of just dissecting where we wanted to be in 5 years. So tonight, what is strategic planning? Strategic planning is an organizational management activity that helps us set priorities, focus our energy and resources, strengthen our operations, align employees and stakeholders on a path toward common goals, establish agreement around intended outcomes and results, and assess the direction of an organization in a changing environment. And that number 6 really hits home with us because we were definitely in a changing environment. Why a strategic plan? Marion is a growing community that demands and it deserves excellence. Public safety budgets impact a large portion of our general fund. The Marion Police Department has a sincere, strong desire to become one of the best police departments in the United States. A strategic plan serves as a foundation for us to serve our citizens in a progressive and professional manner. So how did our plan get developed? I don't know why that's going off center there. We utilized a theory of change model, and I'm not going to lie to y'all, before I began this process, I didn't know what a theory of change model was. But what it does is we all sat together in a room and we started talking about the what ifs. Where could we be? Where do we want to be in 5 years? And we figured out those things first. And then what we did is we started working backwards. Okay, what are the things that we need to do over the next 5 years to create the conditions to allow us to achieve those goals long term? And so that was kind of our process. But it really began a long time ago. We started this the moment I walked in the door. And the moment my executive staff began embracing some of the changes that we've made in the last year and a half. I won't get into it a lot because I briefed you, but we've done a lot of things that have changed in the last year and a half. A chain of command structure, call prioritization, one-officer car procedures. So many things have changed in our department that are going to require a lot of thought and a lot of investment to keep going over the next 5 years. Community feedback. We did community public listening sessions. Right now we're finishing up a 100-day challenge where the officers in the Marion Police Department have literally contacted and introduced themselves to every business in the city of Marion. And we also drew heavily upon the 21st Century Policing Report that was issued by the Obama administration about 5 years ago. Employee engagement. We've met face-to-face with the employees in our department. I hold staff meetings regularly. I have regular interactions with our union membership. And we also took the results of the Talent Map survey that was conducted in November of 2017 by the city of Marion. Our team was top to bottom, plus our IT manager from the city of Marion. Myself, Deputy Chief Slagle, Admin Manager Shalene Gray, Lieutenants Elam, Miller, Knott, and Murda, which they're all here tonight. Thanks for coming, y'all. I appreciate it. Sergeant Fort is also here tonight. Appreciate him being here. Corporal Schamberger, Investigator Ward, Officer Clark, Dispatcher Kaczynski, and Terrell Hunter from Marion IT. So we all walked in the room, and first thing we did is we threw our ranks in the trash, and we just came together with a common goal. We want to make Marion the best police department in the United States. And from that, we started looking at the outcomes. We had to create new mission and vision statements for the department. No goals or ideas were dismissed based on a "we can't do this" or that's crazy attitude. You'll see a lot of stuff on those pieces of paper over there that aren't in the plan. I mean, it was really just a think tank of ideas and looking at other agencies, best practices, mistakes that we've made. to come together and build a process for us to really do what we want to do, and that's make MPD one of the best. I can't go on any further without thanking the National Technical Training Assistance Center. They sent us one of the best resources in the United States in Nola Joyce. Nola was the Deputy Commissioner for Philadelphia, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. She came to Marion, Iowa free of charge, helped us with this process. I learned a ton, and I think my staff learned a ton. So elements of a strategic plan. The first thing is we redid our mission statement. We drafted a new vision statement. In the plan, you're going to find 6 goals. You'll find strategies to achieve those goals, and you'll find basic measures of success to achieve the goals. And you also will find staggered tables for staffing growth over the next 5 years under Goal 1 and Goal 6. One thing I do want to stress, especially to the council, my manager, and to the media in the room, this plan is not about staffing. Okay, it's not a staffing plan. It is a plan that incorporates staffing that is needed to achieve the goals in this plan. This is a plan about the future of the police department, how we utilize current staff, utilize resources, and add staff over the next 5 years to achieve this goal, or the goals. Our new mission statement. We're really proud of this. This took a long time for us to come up with. You wouldn't think it would, but it did. A lot of word play with it. But the mission of the Marion Police Department is to effectively use resources to respond, investigate, and prevent crime in order to enhance the quality of life and strengthen economic prosperity for our community. Our vision statement, as you'll see, it's very bold. And we mean this. We want to be a metro leader among law enforcement agencies by growing with excellence through an emphasis on employee development, strategic collaborative partnerships with the community, other city departments, and other law enforcement agencies. The 6 strategic goals. Like I said, the plan is broken down into 6 goals. Goal number 1, utilize technology, data analysis, research, and strategies to appropriately staff the agency and respond, investigate, and prevent crime. Goal 2, our personnel are highly trained, engaged, and committed to ethical service. Goal 3, Marion Police Department engages in community and business partnerships. Goal 4, city departments work together to advance public safety and fiscal responsibility. Goal 5, develop collaborative partnerships with area criminal justice agencies. And Goal 6, just because it's Goal 6 doesn't mean it's 6th in relation to important. If there's something that I worry about every single day, it's progressing our communication center to the next level. We're going to do it. We have the staff to do it. We have the capacity to do it. We're going to get the staff to do it. And in concert with our fire department over there, we'll knock it out of the park for you. Caveat there, we are still very much engaged in consolidation talks with Cedar Rapids and Lynn County. They're moving extremely slow. There are varied opinions among the working group, and we cannot take a wait-and-see approach to see what happens in 2-3 years with that working group, if it takes that long. We have to prepare now. And moving forward with that communication center over the next 5 years will get us where we need to be. And if something happens 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, where everybody comes together and says, hey, we're going to consolidate, this plan will totally work toward that goal still. So highlighting and reviewing the plan. I'm not going to sit here for 3 hours tonight and review the plan. This is just a quick overview, but highlighting and reviewing the plan to council, the mayor, and city manager is an essential step for us to gain feedback and insight. The plan will always be a living, breathing document that's going to evolve with the progression of the city, the progression of our plan, and things that are going to occur that we don't even know are going to occur yet. Goal champions will be presenting the plan over the next 3 months. We've broken it down. I will make an annual presentation to the city manager and council for accountability, and any budgetary discussions that I have with the city manager will be based on this plan. Timeline for the plan review. Goal 1 will be presented to council August 21st by myself. Goal 2 will be presented on September 4th by Sergeant Jeff Hartwig. Goal 3 will be presented on September 18th by Lieutenant Chad Knott. On October 2nd, we'll present Goal 4. That will be Administrative Manager Shalene Gray. On October 16th, we'll present Goal 5. That'll be Lieutenant Scott Elam. November 6th, we will present Goal 6, and that'll be Deputy Chief Slagle and Lead Dispatcher Kaczynski. And then on the 20th, right before Thanksgiving, I will give kind of a recap. And I don't know if it'd be appropriate, but I would ask for a motion to support our efforts to grow the Marion Police Department and make it one of the best agencies in the United States. Quick acknowledgments. I want to thank my staff. I want to thank the support of the National Technical Training Assistance Center, City Manager's Office, and everybody on council for listening to us for the past few months. We brought a lot in front of you, and we're going to continue to do that. It's because we're passionate about what we do. We want to be the best, and we want to set the bar very high for our police department. So know what's coming ahead, and feel free to ask any questions now. In your folder, you will find 3 documents. You will find the strategic plan. You will find a staffing analysis study that was conducted in November of 2017 by the University of Cincinnati, and you will also find a staffing or a consolidation study presented by L.R. Kimball on the public safety answering points that recommends full consolidation. So I'll take any questions from council now.
Any questions?
Just a statement. Again, I think our police department has had a reputation in the past by people living in surrounding communities that we are tough, and I've always liked that. And now I like that we're going to add smart to that as well. Not that you haven't been smart, but I think this certainly adds another layer to demonstrate the new methods, ideas, techniques that the police department is willing to look at.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, gentlemen. None of them are hearing me.
Before we switch over, I just want to thank Chief McHale and the staff, the entire police department, that doing a strategic change, a mission statement. I've been through that process. That is very painful. There's a lot of hours put into that process. So the day of our officers walking a beat, so to speak, and shaking hands with the grocery store owner that's out there sweeping the streets are over, unfortunately. But the things that we're seeing come to light are incredible. The 100-day challenge was incredible. I've talked to business owners in town that have witnessed that. They were shocked at the process and very excited. It only makes the weaving of our city even stronger. So kudos to you and your department. So thank you very much. Chief Crable, the floor is yours.
Yes, this is quick. An RFQ has been sent out to very many architects. I think about 30 I have sent them to, ones that I have made contact with at conferences and different places. And of course, all of our local architects were included in that. What I would like to do is put together a committee to choose the architect from those RFQs to help with the interview process and things like that. And I would like to know who the council would like of the council to represent the council on that committee.
Let me see, who's not here?
I did
volunteer for a few things, but I would volunteer to be on that committee. I've watched the last 2 being developed and built, so I have some experience on this thing.
Good.
Yes.
Leo Pfeiffer's not around anymore.
We have representation from the engineering, the planning, the finance, the city manager's office. I've asked pretty much everyone that's going to have their fingers in this. So I didn't know if the council wanted 1 or 2 representatives, so that's why I came to you. Who would you like to put on the committee? And I will make sure that you get all correspondence, and we'll be meeting.
Very good. Do we want to make a final decision here, or do we want to include the other three to see if there is a request for one or two individuals? It sounds like we've got one for sure.
We'll see if anybody else
One.
wants to do it. Paul'd be
Okay.
great.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. We'll be excited to move forward with that. Parks, Mike?
Yes, I just wanted to give the council a brief update related to the emerald ash borer. We do have a confirmed positive identification in Marion. The location of the ash tree that the sample was taken from is along 44th Street, north of Business 151 and south of McGowan Boulevard. It was actually on private property, and we went out and sampled the tree at the request of the property owner. We had that sample sent off to Iowa State University to confirm what we had thought that it was, the emerald ash borer larva. So with that positive identification, we start to implement our emerald ash borer readiness plan. So the first step in that plan, once we receive that positive identification, is to notify the city manager. The next step in that is to notify the city council, which is what I am doing now. The next step with that is that we will prepare a news release to push out to the media and the public. Next step after that would be that we will do a survey of the infested area. We will block out a grid, and our forestry staff will do inspections of trees, trying to look for stressors associated with the emerald ash borer. After that is completed, we will actually start a removal process of ash trees in that identified infested area. We will start with dead or poor condition trees, but eventually, unless that tree has received a treatment, all trees within those areas will be removed. We will stagger those removals over time, but that is the plan based on what we have set out in the readiness plan criteria and protocols. Just for a little information, we did, for the council, we did do a full street tree inventory back in 2016, so we do have a really good up-to-date inventory of our street trees in Marion. Of the street trees, 15% of those public trees are ash trees, which correlates to 991 trees currently. That number was a little bit higher, but we have been working under the criteria that the borer was already in the area. We just hadn't had that positive ID. So we have been actively removing ash trees in our right-of-way. So currently it's at 999. Of those, 282 are park trees and 709 are street trees. And of that total, 92 of those trees have received insecticide treatment. And those trees, based on the criteria that were put in place in the readiness plan, are trees what are deemed significant, and those trees were graded by the tree board and the forestry staff. So 92 trees out of that total have received treatment. We still are evaluating some of the trees as far as whether they can meet that criteria and be treated. And we do still have time in areas that we can do those. But just wanted to give council a quick update on where we're at with that, and be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Mike, have we done any more public information things on the people that have the ash trees?
We originally did, when we were implementing the plan, we did public outreach at that time. We also recently sent out notice through a press release, and we were kind of partnering with Cedar Rapids on a public outreach meeting over there. So that would be the most recent one. That was a little over a month ago when that one happened. We're probably going to hold another public outreach meeting now that we have that positive ID in Marion, and as we push that out, that's there, I'm sure that we'll be receiving a lot of calls, so I think we'll have the opportunity to probably schedule another meeting with the public in the near future, just to be able to provide more information and answer any concerns that anybody might have.
Yeah, I've had people ask about treating them, which I don't know anything about, or what it costs, or anything, so.
Yeah, but we always, and within the press release, and as we have, pushed out information, we do encourage residents to call the office. We can help them with what some of those application processes are, and what's out there on the market, and then also provide, some contractors that they can contact to do injections. And we would recommend injections versus a topical dressing. You're getting 100% of the uptake into the tree, and that would be what we would recommend in a private tree, and it's also what we would insist to as an application in a public tree in the street right away.
Is that an annual thing, Mike?
It's actually every 2 years right now. There has been some research done to where they are looking at pushing that out to 3 years. Some of those studies out of Michigan are coming back that they're actually able to extend that out. Some of that, I think, as they look at those, stretching those years out a little bit, as the food supply for the emerald ash borer declines, which we've seen in some of those states that first had the emerald ash borer, there's not nearly the amount of borer present anymore, so they feel comfortable that they can kind of push that out a little bit because there's lower numbers. The food source is gone basically because the ash trees are gone.
So just to let you know, Paul, I have a large tree in my front yard that is 24 years old, and I had it treated. So the 2 to 3 year cycle is exactly what was confirmed to me. My cost was $220.
$220.
Yeah. That's a
Yeah,
it's a pretty good sized tree.
Mm-hmm. What do we do with them, Mike? We cut them down. Can we burn them? What do we do with them?
Well, right now, a lot of the material that we do is being chipped and then reprocessed. There's a lot of options, and we'll have to walk through some things as that amount grows of what we have for product. I mean, there's some opportunities to outsource some of the ash for pallet wood. Again, we're a quarantine state, so unless it's been kiln dried, you can't transport that material out of the state, but there are some opportunities within the state. But we'll take a look at some of those, and some of it will just be recycled into organic material.
Thank you. $200, huh?
Mm-hmm. The 92 trees that have been treated so far, are they doing all right then?
What's that?
The 92 trees that we have been treating, those
Yes.
are all okay?
Yep, all the trees that were treated. Again, those were trees that were in great condition. Weren't showing any stress or signs of declining condition, and we would not have treated them if they weren't. But yes, they all still look really good.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike. Moving on to engineering.
Were there any questions about any of the payments? All right, so E2 is receiving, filing, and discussing the TEEP recommendations that we got. So Aaron gave the presentation on that. I did give you 30 pages of the traffic reports in your council packet. I did include all the incident reports and stuff like that. So basically, to reiterate, there was the short term of add the recommended signs and signal mass arms on the intersection of Central Avenue and 10th Street to avoid the red time and the yellow-red clearance times at the intersection of Central and 10th, trimming the trees along Lindale Drive, and then updating the signs at West 8th and Lindale were the short-term recommendations. The longer term was basically a mini roundabout at 10th and 10th, and then a full-blown roundabout at West 8th and Lindale. One thing I do want to bring up is the hardware at 10th and 10th is outdated, and public service can't really control the timing as well as they could if it was a new signal. If we do leave this existing signal there, there is $50,000 to $60,000 we have to spend on new hardware on that signal hardware. So the detection to determine when to change the signal from a red to a green. So that is one thing to keep in mind as we move forward. So future items, number 3, we're actually proposing to apply for traffic safety improvement program funding for the 10th and 10th, but not for the West 8th and Lindale, just because if we do, then that would be 4 applications that would be sending in, and that with that, it's hard to get funding for all of them. We could still apply for all 4, but we're recommending that we wait on the West 8th and Lindale for a following year.
My understanding is we're also going to have a traffic study completed for the intersection around 10th Avenue, 7th Avenue, Hy-Vee, 31st Street there.
Yep. The
35th
TSIP
Street,
application, we won't be able to meet that deadline.
Okay, so, I consider that to be a worse intersection than those other 2. So does applying for the 1 year for 10th and 10th now, does that potentially impact that one if that study comes in with the same recommendation, which I'd assume it would?
So we have gotten a preliminary one back, and basically their first shot at it was replace the signals, and then a couple years later build a large roundabout, and we said that doesn't make a lot of sense to spend that much money. So we told them to go back to that and look at that again, and that's why we're waiting, why it's taking so long on that. Anytime you apply for multiple applications, there's only so much money out there. Everyone is applying for money. So that might be one that we have to, local option sales tax or some other funding that we have to do for that. But we won't have the traffic plan back in time for this TSIP application, so it won't affect this year application.
That'd be the following year then?
Yep.
All right.
Trying to remember, as we do our 5-year plan, are either of those roundabouts part of that at this point?
They're both in there as draft. I don't know if they're actually approved in the CIP or not.
But they are in there.
As proposed projects, I don't know if they've been approved.
Okay.
Did they make the cut? Your question is, did they make our cut?
Right.
Initial cut?
Right.
Yeah, I think we're still working through that, so I'm not sure where they were in that ranking. But unlike when we apply for like MPO funds where there's an 80-20 split, on TSIP applications, assuming we get the full amount, there is no matching amount. So they could pay for up to 100% of it.
Any other questions for Mike on that one?
I have a question about Central and 10th. So with Albernet going through, do you have a forecast on traffic counts for that intersection?
Yeah, the MPO is currently updating that model. We don't have it in front of us today, but yeah, when Albernet Road goes in, that will take some of that traffic volume off of 10th, but there's still going to be a lot of north-south traffic, which is the major contributor.
Mm-hmm.
It should take some off of 10th Avenue turning onto 10th Street, assuming they're not already cutting through the neighborhood. So item E3 then is application of TSIP for Central and 10th. That's converting from a signalized intersection to a mini roundabout. The preliminary construction estimate is $289,000. The main thing that the DOT looks at when they see if it's a good candidate is the cost to benefit ratio. So they look at traffic accidents, they look at injuries, and they put a dollar value to that, just like insurance does, to determine if it's a good candidate or not. For this one, it's a 2.86 to a 1, and then again, it will save $50,000 to $60,000 hardware costs that we would currently have to do if we don't improve that intersection. So we're recommending that we apply for the TSIP application and see what happens.
What's our plan B for that? Are the lights now operating by time, or are they still on signal at this point?
Right now, at that intersection, there's in-pavement detectors. If you go down there, they're sawed in the pavement. Two things going on. Number one, they're getting old. They're starting not to work. Number two, if you notice, next time you're going down there, on the northbound turn lane, so you're going to turn, you're northbound, you're going to turn on Central, you'll notice that that turn lane's skewed. It's offset. And if you look, you'll see that detectors are not in the middle of the lane, so it's never really worked right. And so we're fighting a couple different things there, and that's the same thing over on the southbound turn lane as well. And so the first thing is we have some aging detection. Second thing is they're not in the right place. And so if the roundabout doesn't happen, we're going to have to upgrade the detection in that area.
Do we have the capability to go into that visual system?
Yeah, that's what we do. That's what's proposed here. If that roundabout doesn't happen, we would implement video detection.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
How much more life is in those signals?
The actual mast arms?
Yeah, the mast arms are fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I believe those were built 1999.
Okay.
We have plenty of time in those, as well as signal cabinet. It's just the detection there, as well as probably Mike can speak to this. There's a lot of congestion as well, and so I think that's why they're probably looking at the roundabout.
Okay.
Anything else on E3? So there's just a blow up of it, like Aaron showed you guys, of doing the mini roundabout. So E4 is the West 8th and Lindale, so we wrote it as a resolution approving it, but again, we're only recommending that we wait just because we're going to have enough of them that we're applying for, and the preliminary cost estimate is $800,000. This would convert it from a two-way stop control to a full roundabout. So this one, if you did not want us to apply for it, you'd have to vote it down.
Okay.
Or we could take it off the agenda if you guys concur with that.
Take it off.
Take it off, might as well.
Yeah, take it off.
Okay. All right, E5, we got a request to add Highway 100 and South 31st Street as a TSIP application. This would convert it from a two-way stop control to a traffic signal and turn lanes. The preliminary cost estimate is $535,497. The preliminary cost to benefit ratio is a 6.07 to 1, so you can see it's considerably higher than the others. And that does include the two most recent accidents that occurred, and that's why it bumped the numbers up. This is partially in Lynn County. It's actually mostly in Lynn County, and they've actually concurred with us that they are willing to be a co-applicant, and that always helps your application when you have more than one application. And so in your council packet, you saw they already had a resolution approving that, so they're willing to move forward with us. And so here's kind of the diagram of what the intersection right now, and you can see most of the intersection is in the county. And so if we got the funding, we would actually have to do a 2080 with them and work out what portions they pay for versus what we pay for if there was a shortage in funding. But the hope would be with the TSIP application that it would cover all of the funding. Item 6 is the 668 7th Avenue parking lot project. The engineer's estimate is $27,000. This is north of 7th Avenue and west of 7th Street, proposing a letting date of 9/4/18 with a completion of 5/31/19. The premise behind that is if it gets to where it's the end of the year and a contractor's looking for work, then they can do it as filler work in the fall, or they can hit it first thing in the spring and get it done because it's a really small project. And then liquidated damages of $300 per day. And this is per the 7th and 7th roundabout MOU that's dated 2/5/15 with Chuck Kent. And a copy of that MOU is provided to you in the council packet. So all it is basically there's a little L that we take from the alley into his parking lot. That was part of that agreement.
That's Chuck Kent's office?
Yeah.
Yes,
So it's just a drive from the alley into.
correct.
Okay.
20-foot wide, hard surface pavement. It'll be bid as an alternate bid, whether it's similar to how we did Lau Park, or it'll either be HMA or PCC, depending on how the bids come in.
Is the entrance gone now? That's on 7th Ave?
He still has the shared entrance, that's the alleyway. But the one that you can kind of see here, that one, that's part of the reason why we're adding this one is we bought that access from him.
Okay.
So that's pre-roundabout. You can kind of see the roundabout outline on there.
I would like to see us, and Tom will appreciate, do something with the parking lot on 9th that the city owns before we spend any more money on anything to do with parking. That lot has been there, and I don't know how he can go out and convince people that they have to asphalt their parking lot when the city owns a gravel parking lot in the middle of town. It's desperately in need to be done, drained properly, and taken care of. I'm off my bandwagon, that's all. But Tom, you won't disagree with me, I don't.
I bring that up now and again as well. I'll twist Ryan's arm.
Do we have, I'm kind of struggling on this one. Do we have any other irregular lots that would be comparable to doing this?
What do you mean?
To provide this driveway, I mean, was that part of our agreement?
Yeah. So it's in the MOU that because we were taking away his access off of 7th Avenue, we're providing him a new access off of the alley instead.
I think we made some promises when we put the roundabout in.
Yeah, it was part of the MOU.
Yeah.
Yep. And we didn't do it as part of the project because we didn't want to muddy the waters with the DOT and the federal funds. So now that the project's done and accepted, now we're coming in and doing this.
Does Chuck still want that done?
Yep, we just met with him yesterday.
Did you?
Yep.
Okay, because he's got access, but, okay.
He has a few clients that don't like to drive through the roundabout.
All right, well, promise is a promise.
Can you vote on that as a competitor?
We're going on to number 6.
All right, number E7, 525 11th Street. Here's an overview of it. You can kind of see what the original house outline was and the 3 additions that were put on it at later years. We did do asbestos testing in it, and unfortunately it does have asbestos in it. We also do want to bring up that 520 12th Street and 535 40 12th Street also have asbestos in them that will have to be mitigated, and that will have to occur whether we just demo them or if they're relocated. No matter what, that asbestos has to be mitigated. We did have a mover come and he met with staff, and he walked through 525 11th Street. And from that walkthrough, he gave a verbal estimate of $150,000 to move 525 from its current location to north of the McGowan House, which we just used since the city owned it and get an estimate to start the conversation at least. And then he gave a verbal estimate for 520 12th Street that would be $100,000 to move that one. So again, we just propose that they individually go to the McGowan House for the estimation. It would take 2 weeks to prepare for the move, 1 day to actually move it, a number of days to attach it to the new foundation, and then there would be additional work for patching holes, tuck pointing, etc., and that was not included in his estimate. We have then talked to Kyle Martin with Martin Gardner to get proposals to actually do an assessment of the building, and what those would do is they would include condition reports that would bring the building back to its proper service, whether it moves or not, basically repointing, plaster repair, structural issues, give you kind of a cost estimate or opinion on all of those. To do 525 6th Avenue, that would cost us $8,000. For 520 12th Street, it'd be $6,000. And for 535 40 12th Street, it'd be $9,000. If we commission them to do all three of them, they'd give us a break of $2,000 and do them all three for $21,000 to give just estimates of what it would cost to bring them back up to par. Few pictures of you just to kind of show. I don't know how many of you guys have been over there lately. This is 525 11th Street. You can see between the windows there's some bricks with some mortar issues. Here you can see on the base of it where they had some issues with the bricks. They just kind of threw some mortar in there to fix it. We already have a lot of cracks inside the house. Obviously, when you move a structure, there's going to be a few shifting walls. Water damage on the ceilings, and again, more cracks. This doorway here is actually one where you can see the old bricks, and they did a really good job of making it nice and straight. Here's where they actually painted some of the bricks. I don't know if they had to rehab them. And then this doorway is actually for one of the additions. So the original building here, they would have cut a hole in it to put this doorway in to go from an addition to another room of the house. So what we're looking for is direction from council on what you guys want us to do moving forward with these buildings.
Is this the same moving company that just moved the one on 8th
No.
Avenue? This is a different one?
Yep.
So are we going to get another estimate, or is this?
I can get you as many estimates as you want, but ballpark, that's going to be about what they are. I mean, we knew that beforehand, that they were $120,000 to $150,000 was the previous estimates, and that was just looking at the assessor's website. That wasn't them walking through it with staff.
So when he gives an initial verbal assessment of a certain number, could that increase if he were to look at it and do a more in-depth review?
Yeah, so for example, in your memo, I wrote that if the big beams that they have to use to move it,
right,
depending on what lot we put it on, if he can't pull those beams back out and he has to cut them and he can't salvage them, then your cost goes up because he just lost additional material. If you're going to move it farther than the McGowan House lot, if you're going to move it to a different lot, your price goes up. There's all kind, but we just wanted to start and get a hard estimate of someone actually walking through it and telling us what it's going to cost instead of just looking at pictures and throwing out a number.
Yeah, it's more than we had before.
And one of the other items that was brought up when we first discussed this was the parking ramp and whether or not the footprint of the parking ramp could be changed. In talking with the developer, rather than trying to make it an L shape around the house or anything like that, it would be more feasible to actually shrink the footprint to stay on half a block. If they were to do that, that's not a problem from a design standpoint, but what you end up having to do is they still have to use the alley because they need that area for the ramp. So it would be like if you think of the north half of the block plus the alley, they would need that area for the footprint of the ramp. And to make sure that they don't lose net parking places, you have to give up on the idea of having commercial on the main floor, and you have to make it a full 4 stories tall from the beginning instead of 3 stories tall. So by making it taller and foregoing any commercial on the main floor, you end up only losing about 18 parking spaces. It doesn't have a huge impact on the cost of the ramp. Well, I guess relative to the cost of building a parking ramp, it's not huge. It is substantial, but it is something that would be feasible. What they're going to do for the whole uptown area is put together what is called a massing diagram. He volunteered to take some drone footage of uptown Marion, and then they can take some drawings they can do in an architectural program and actually impose them into that so the council can get an idea of what the structures would look like in relationship to the existing uptown.
Well, owning a piece of property of about that same age, there's no surprises that you'd have to do some repairs on that building. Been there, done that. I think that we need to give some consideration if we were to find somebody within a close proximity who would take that building, if we were to give it to them and pay to move it out of hotel motel tax, lost fund, TIF, or whatever, it is an historical piece of property that hopefully could be saved. If it can't, it can't. But I think that some of us would like the opportunity to shop around the neighborhood and see if there isn't someone who would take that. And yes, it's going to cost a lot of money. I know that. We need to spend a lot of money on the McGowan House. It's part of the labor of love of owning historical property, but it also is part of what we're known for in our community, and what we need to continue to strive to try to save. If we can't, we can't. But I think it's worth every effort, whether we build around it, whether we find where we can move it to. No surprise there's asbestos in it. We tore down a whole block right over here, a whole block, and hauled it all to the dump. And you never heard asbestos mentioned. And I know the depot was full of it in the basement. All the pipes were wrapped in it and what have you. It's a different era, I realize that. But it doesn't surprise me that there's asbestos in that building. It's what they used, I'm sure it's not insulated. My building is 3 or 4 bricks thick, which acts as some insulation. And cracks, sure, we had 40 trains a day running by. You get cracks. It happens. But if you walk through it, and it's not like a house that Will would walk a client through and say, yeah, this is perfect, nice kitchen, nice this and that. It needs some work. There ain't any question about it. But it also historically is something that we should consider trying to figure out what to do with.
Mike, do we have any cost estimates as the demolition for that?
I would say, I don't know if we had a BOD estimate that or not, but I would say $20,000 to $25,000 if it was just a demo. You would still have the asbestos here regardless, so that would be an additional. Like I put in the memo, that was $19,000 or something we paid for 3600 Winslow, which you're going to have that year regardless.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mike is looking for some direction from council on what you would like to do next. Do you want to engage with Martin Gardner to have him come in and do an assessment of this building, any combination of the 3 buildings? Most of the conversation I'm hearing from council is really focusing on this one and not towards the other 2. But we're just kind of wanting to know what steps to go through next. Because even with what Councilman Draper is outlining, there's a way that we could accommodate that in doing an RFP for removal and demolition of the remaining structures in the block, if that's the way we wanted to head, as part of the request for proposals or requests for bids on demolition.
I don't recall hearing any discussion about trying to save the other buildings
Me neither.
by anybody. Has there been?
No, I don't
But
believe
we
so.
wanted to make sure you guys knew that those were brick as well.
Yeah.
And not, oh yeah, by the way.
Well, not at the same level. It doesn't have the same design as the one here, does it?
No, plus it's been painted, which reduces its
Okay.
historical value considerably.
Okay.
I guess I would like to do just that. I would like to try to carve this particular one out of future conversation. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to hold up the progress of the rest of the block, in my opinion. And see if we can't strike up some interest on this, of this particular building.
I know the mayor had certainly a strong opinion about this building, but never mentioned the other ones at all. So I know he would stand behind that as well.
And I would like to see, could you provide council with the slides that you just presented for us via email?
Yep.
I know there's some critical numbers on there I think would be beneficial for the missing council members this evening.
Yep.
And again, too, I don't want to delay anything, but we want to try to do our due diligence on this particular item here.
If I might add also, I don't know that we ever had any discussions. I don't recall any discussions about any of the whether the historic preservation group had even looked at the other two buildings, and I just don't know from the purposes of maybe between now and Thursday I can get anything on that from Dave in particular and be able to present that too. I've just never heard. No one's ever said anything about the other two structures on the block, and I'd hate to have us go down the road and then have someone bring it up after the fact. So if I can, I'll bring that back as well, if that makes sense. I mean, just so that all the cards are on the table when it references to the.
I think that'd be great. Thanks, Tom, for offering that. I think that would be a good. Let's take a moment to check into that, before we do.
So maybe for Thursday, we add a resolution approving a contract with Martin Gardner for at least 525 6th Avenue so we can get some hard numbers.
I would believe so.
Yeah.
And then if you guys want to see if there's some people out there that are interested in getting it or give us some ideas.
Yep, I think that would be great. The asbestos, what were those numbers again up there? For the 19,000
No,
for
I'm
the.
going to guess around 9. We don't have a hard number on what the asbestos was. In the memo, I just assumed basically based on 3,600.
Okay.
It has to be done either way, so.
Right.
And that's something we'll provide everything that we have to Martin Gardner when they're due their estimation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for doing that and putting the extra efforts into this particular one. Any other questions on this particular topic? Nope. Okay. Moving on then, we will move over to community development.
Yes, please.
So we just have a couple items this evening. I think there's 26. Yeah. I'm going to try and go through these a little briefly. A number of these are on public hearings are related to alley vacations. And as I've stated before, these take quite a bit of time and effort on behalf of the staff here at City Hall as well as the legal staff. So just as I go through these, if I'm going too quick or if you have questions, stop me. But the staff reports kind of spell it out. But there's item number 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all related to the Shaw vacation request. In particular, what is being proposed is the vacation and sale of the property as requested by Mr. Shaw. And you can see in your packet the information. The alley located between 3rd and 4th Street and 6th Ave and 5th Ave, highlighted in red. Mr. Shaw's maintained the property. That's the alley. Pretty hard to traverse. So he made a request to proceed with the vacation and sale. Staff's reviewed it, and we're recommending approval. The Planning Commission has heard this. I don't believe anybody attended the Planning Commission meeting and opposed the vacation and sale. So that one's pretty straightforward. The way it's calculated it would, and is set by city policy, be $798 is the city's return on that sale. Number 6, 7, 8, and 9, and 10 and 11 are all related to the same vacation area. block between 10th Street and 11th Street and 3rd and 4th Ave. The area highlighted is the proposed location of the vacation and the sale. The property owners to the east here have both, they both indicated they do not want to participate and do not want their half of the alley. These two owners have stated they would like to have the alley, and so they've made the request to purchase. The individual that had this house, they had come to the Planning Commission meeting and voiced and actually made a request that the decision to move forward with the vacation be stalled or be tabled until such time as she was able to sell the home, because there was a pending sale. There really is no access south of that lot. I think the sale has went through, and I believe it was approved, so the person that came and made that request does not own the property anymore. And there is access to the north as well. So I think the Planning Commission didn't feel like that was a legitimate concern, and they moved forward with recommending approval, and as does staff as well. So I don't know if there'll be someone here on Thursday in reference to that. The concern and what brought the issue forward was the individual that has the property on the southernmost side. You can see the alleyway kind of is still maintained like the alleyway. Someone had driven through like in the winter, and it may have been a utility truck because there is a utility easement up through there. So, but anyway, they would come home from and see someone tracks in your backyard. It would cause some concern. So that's what brought their position forward. It doesn't appear that there's any neighborhood disputes or anything that are driving any other decision other than the tire tracks. So as indicated and as provided in the staff report, if I can find it. One's 480, 160, and one would be, I believe they're both the same. So they're yeah, because they're both 60 foot. So we would move forward or propose to move forward in that direction. And as you can see, there's a number of public hearings related to each of those items. So,
Tom, just for clarification, when we have property owners that are not interested in that property, what are the options then at that point? Does the other property owners get to the right to purchase through the
correct
to the other side?
Yep.
Okay,
so we make that offer. So we give each adjoining property owner to the alley has first right of refusal on their proportionate share of that alleyway, which is usually split down the middle. So it's usually 10 feet, or they're 5 feet. Of a 10-foot
okay,
alley.
thank you.
Yep. Item number 12 is a preliminary plat for Landher addition. So this property, I'm sure everybody's familiar with. Corner of Alburnett Road and Boyson Road. I think they plant the callas. That was, everybody knows them by the large, I think they're called callas. Let red flowers out there. The property is zoned agriculture, A1. It's been split a couple of different times over the years. You know, this is one of those times when you open the file and you look at it and you go, you hope your name's not on it, because there's been a number of plats, and we should have had a preliminary plat many years ago. So in working with the owners, we did ask that a preliminary plat be provided. I think there's been 2 splits off the original tract without one. Which, I mean, it's not surprising. A lot of them were quite a while ago, when this was probably on the north side of the edge of town. So the preliminary plat that's being proposed includes 5 lots, a larger lot, one on the corner, and then 3 lots adjacent to Alburnett Road. This is an existing split off, and as was this. So there's 2 splits that have occurred. The lot configuration is referencing to Albernet Road. There's a rural cross-section there. Ultimately, Albernet Road is going to extend from Boyson and go north, so it's likely that this road will become a local road. I don't know that the determination has been fully made, but at some point, this section of Albernet Road may not exist because we wouldn't want to maintain a lighted intersection if it's not necessary. I don't know if that decision has been 100% made.
Not yet.
It'll likely come to the council in the next few years as we start down the road of constructing Albernet. As was pointed out in the memo and at the Planning Commission, generally when you see a final plat, there's some responsibility for the adjacent roadways if construction is occurring. The configuration of the preliminary plat is not supporting any of the construction of Albernet Road. All three lots are fronting, of the new extension of Albernet Road, all lots would be fronting the existing extension. So there would ultimately, unless lot 1 is final platted, which is this larger, there's lot 6 as well. But if lot 6 or lot 1 are final platted, there would be dedication and responsibility for portions of the new Albernet. Honestly, don't see that happening. And they configured the plat to avoid that, which it's just the way it is. I mean, they have that right. They have the opportunity. The plat meets the standards, but I don't want the council to think that down the road we should have received any of that dedication with the preliminary plat. It's just the way they configured it. It doesn't require that that's maintained unless they final plat and sell off a portion of lot 1 or lot 6. So there is 7 foot that we would need when that project does come to light, and we would need to acquire that 7 foot from them. So it's being identified as a strip in this plat, as a matter of fact. So after the conversation at the Planning Commission meeting, they did make a recommendation to proceed with approval of the preliminary plat of the Landher addition. So I think they're really trying to sell off, I think, lot 3 or 4 or 5. It's a family member that they're splitting that off. There's, I think the other splits may have been related to the family as well. I don't know that for sure, but. So if there's any questions on that, try to cover it.
Jumping ahead on that, so obviously they would build homes there. Would that be allowed prior to the new Albernet and the closing of old Albernet?
So if they were to pull a permit on any lot, it would have to be final platted. And at that time, if the new Albernet Road was not constructed, we would get the dedication at that point, and they would have responsibility for the road. If they don't ever build on that lot, then there's no responsibility.
I guess my question is putting in access on the current Albernet in those 2 locations prior to new Albernet being open.
Difficult.
I wouldn't want that. You wouldn't want new drives on.
Yeah, they would access what we would call the old Albernet Road.
Right, but you wouldn't want that. You wouldn't want new access on the old Albernet there, would you?
It's better than having them on the new Albernet Road.
No. I mean before it's closed off. Am I making sense?
You have accesses
Old,
to the
new, and
you have accesses on the Albernet Road once it straightens and goes north. The previous city engineer accesses his house right off of Albernet Road.
Ooh, maybe we should close that.
You're saying Old Albernet Road, part of it's going to be closed? I thought it was just going to be renamed.
I can see in the future down the road and that this portion of Albernet could be closed. I'm not saying it'd be council directive, but because there's nothing that would access it down here, so this could become a loop drive, and then you wouldn't have a lighted, skewed intersection.
Oh, I see what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Do we ever see an opportunity where old Albernet Road, we would Want to narrow that. Obviously, I know there's not curbs and stuff out there, but I mean, that's a pretty wide road, including shoulders on it. I mean, would there be any potential of selling back any of that land back to those adjacent property owners and making it a narrower road?
Oh, I would defer to engineering on that.
I don't know that we would. The ditches and stuff, a lot of them are mowed in there. I mean, that could be something we do. The bigger conversation is for the new Albernet Road, we actually need 7 foot to get our right-of-way. So when the Skogeman development went in on the west side of new Albernet Road, they went ahead and dedicated that. So that is a potential issue that we'll have now, and we have started that talk with the landowners to get that property, but there is 7 feet that we need from right now.
Now, that's on the new Albernet, right?
On the new Albernet.
And that's where I was kind of going with that, is to, would we need, the complete width of, I mean, it's a very wide road, obviously to maintain out there on the east side on what would be the old Albernet Road. So I was just curious.
There is actually some right-of-way already there, so we only need 7 foot more. So where the new original Albernet Road was, we kept that right-of-way. We actually didn't get rid of it.
Okay.
So we only need 7 feet more.
Nice little drag strip.
And this is the preliminary plat, so there'll be a final plat before anything is permanently subdivided. So there may be more information that comes. I think the concept was that we would try to obtain and acquire the property that we need for Albernet during this period of time. So,
but it did sound like for the final plat, they would only be final platting the lot they're going to build on.
which, just so everybody's clear, I just want the council to be aware of what and how it's configured so that there's not questions later. That's not untypical for a developer to plat 6 lots and only develop the one that they want to final plat. You've seen the area, you know what it is. They'll continue to farm it. I think it's the owner's son that's going to move back to the area. So
I think it's tax base. Any more questions for number 12?
13 through 18, we'll have some public hearings on the proposed amendments to the zoning code. There was a lot of information provided to the city council. We're missing a few people this evening. We're also, I don't know, well, I did go to the Home Builders Association and present the information, talked in generalities. They've received copies of it. I know they have not thoroughly reviewed it. One of the indications and one of the reasons for moving some of this forward has been related to the Central Corridor Plan and the fact that the zoning districts that we're working on through that process require changes to the definitions that we have in our current code. So you'll see that one of the items, the first one, rules and definitions, and that's the largest document we received. You see, if you had a chance to read through it, we're trying to define uses more than we ever have in the past. You can see almost all of that is new information. So that's one of the reasons for moving forward with that particular section. The other reason that we wanted to move forward is we were really hoping that we'd be able to get ahead of the rezoning out on Tower Terrace Road related to the YMCA. That is not occurring as quickly as we were hoping, and it's probably not going to occur, and we'll be rezoning the YMCA and that Gill property to that commercial zoning that we have, or the Mooney piece that does not have hours of operation limitations and does provide for commercial activity out there. They need a closing of that before September 30th. We're not going to be able to meet that from a zoning perspective, which I knew that when we talked about this last week. Our last city council meeting, I just didn't bring it forward. The reason I'm telling you this is that I think what I'd like to do is, you guys have had the information. I can walk through it tonight. There's no rush. It's a lot of information. So on Thursday, rather than close the hearing, adopt the ordinance, and 3 weeks from now when the builders get slower, there's 2 weeks, you get 10 guys in here that are very upset about it. If we just continue the hearing, we can leave it open It doesn't have to be approved. It provides the opportunity for folks that do have a chance to review it. They could come in at the next meeting and discuss those items. If the council's comfortable with that, that's what I would suggest that we do, is leave it open for another meeting and move forward after that, if that works. So, that being said, the first thing I will ask is that you had like 60 pages of, were there any major questions that you had relative to those documents? Or would you like me to walk through them a little bit and give you some rationale towards them?
Some additional comments would help. I mean, I went through it once, cursory.
Yep.
But not,
Okay.
there's a lot of paper there, so if we can make some more sense out of it.
Absolutely. So rules and definitions, and there are 41 pages of this. It's a substantial change to our code. I will say that most of the uses that are identified are associated with the zoning district classifications that are proposed. The changes that we made to the existing definitions in the code, we tried to simplify, and some of them were just plain antiquated, so we removed some of those. So I wasn't going to walk through them all, and I don't think that we need to go through those. What I would say is we've separated the definitions into general land use definitions so that we can talk about something. Let's say in the commercial district, someone wants to do a retail shop, and I talked about this last time. Instead of us defining what retail is, shoe shop, leather shop, I mean, that's kind of the way our ordinance currently is. So what if I'm selling pop bottles? Is that going to be a problem? Well, it's not listed in the code. Well, we tried to broadly define retail. You'll see that we identify retail specialty, with specialty retail in our uptown. We've had chocolate shop, we've got popcorn shop, we've got bakery goods that can be shops uptown. Well, unless you really are, unless you're very specific about it, which sometimes it happens when we're approached with items, a bakery can also be a very big facility. A bakery, a bread. Well, a bakery can also be a restaurant because they're serving food there. So we tried to broadly divide retail specialty, identify a few of those uses that are in that category and in an uptown area, and then exclude and point them in the direction. So if they're a bakery and they have seating, then it'd be a restaurant. So you can see that there's some details that we've tried to work through. And there's a lot of, I guess, over the years of being in zoning administration, there's just a lot of tweaks and changes that we made within the definitions to kind of broad brush them instead of trying to be very specific. In the retail sales area, we also talk about limiting the size of a building in specific districts. So I think we have a small, medium, and large, and we put design parameters on the size of that building. So if you were in a local business district, which would be a neighborhood commercial district, we're going to have a smaller building. Community business districts, which I would see as Tower Terrace Road, you'd have a Fairway or a CVS size building. And then obviously on the regional, we just wouldn't have a limitation. That's where you'd see your big box stores. Ultimately, I would see that we'd have some design standards. There are no design standards proposed within what we have here. We're just trying to get the uses, the districts outlined and moving those forward. So as you look through them, that's what I would kind of think through from the definitions perspective. One major change we did make is in family. If you turn to page 8, you can see item 68 was the former definition of family. It was approximately a page and a half. If you can imagine these days trying to define family, it's not easy to do. And I think the state legislature has identified some issues with how communities have identified the definition of family. I'm not saying that the issues with that are going to go away, because if you're a neighbor and your neighbor's family consists of 8 guys that all go to Kirkwood, they're going to have a problem. You're going to have a problem with that definition of a family. But we can't go in and say, are you married? Are you blood related? I mean, there's just things we can't. And I think a lot of codes used to do that. We've changed that definition to, I think we may have moved it to the other. It's one sentence.
Would legal like to jump in here?
I, on behalf of the legal department, I think if you can't define it in a page and a half, I don't think.
Yeah.
Maybe less is better.
And I think it's important because we've not had this issue. We're not a college community, so we don't really have it. But when our rentals start getting, when we start getting more, we've got a lot of rentals. When we can start getting more, when the big houses start to be rented, that's when that kind of comes up. College communities have a huge problem with it. It's a group of individuals not necessarily related by blood, marriage, or legal adoption, living together as a single housekeeping unit. So that can be a group of people living in a unit together. So we run into that as neighborhood concerns, and that's actually where the page and a half definitions come from, and you can see that it changes depending on your zoning district classification.
So you're proposing just striking out number 68 altogether?
Yeah, and we moved it to the, instead of a use definition, just a general definition, and I think we moved it over into the other area, but yeah. We've also defined fireworks sales, so that was probably something we probably need to talk through in the future on where those can be. We've talked about that.
I got one question on number 130.
Okay.
So can you just have that read where it says level of no more than 3% and as defined by Iowa Code Section 124E? Can't you eliminate the of no more than 3% and just say a level as defined by Iowa Code in case the code changes, then you don't have to change this paragraph? So what if that 3% in the future changes to 2%, 4%?
Oh.
So instead of us defining it, let the code define it.
We could. The only reason I think that's there is that way if someone comes in, we can say it's 3. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think those were taken right out of the adopting legislation, but sure, that makes sense. We also tried to identify, like we have no definition of microbrew, brewery. So if someone wants to do that, it's a manufacturing operation for all intents and purposes. So if someone wanted to put a microbrew uptown, that's kind of it's a zoning interpretation that can go haywire. It has in some communities. We certainly want to permit them.
Yeah.
Want to be clear.
Do we need a vote?
So as you go through there, I mean, there's a lot of changes in here. And just, be aware of those. Trying to just look through and see if there was anything major that I can recall that was.
I mean, do you have any of these come up as being, as you would feel there'd be any pushback on or controversial?
No, I don't think that we will.
Definitions?
No, the only time that I think this is going to become controversial is the first time when we actually adopt the regulations, and we go in and we rezone property. So there's okay, what's the definition of commercial? What's the definition of and then that's when you're going to have people asking questions about it. So it's really difficult to say, okay, we're changing the definition of what retail is. Okay, well, how's that affect me? Until somebody is sitting there saying, okay, I'm retail, I'm fine. Until that's when that becomes concern.
Does the state still define assisted living facilities? Number 149 there, it's being called out as nursing home. Do they still refer to those as nursing homes? Just because of our transitional living facilities
I believe they do.
To me, that's old language, but I was just curious.
Yep.
It's very old language.
I think that's a pretty old code provision, to be honest. But We can look into it.
Just curious.
And that's a small part of all that. You look at all the development going on in Cedar Rapids and Marion. That's a small fraction of what they're building.
Because typically nursing homes would be constituted as skilled care, and now the facilities are much more than just skilled care. But
Senior
there's just
living, assisted living,
Yeah.
all the above.
I think a very good job was done in this. I know, again, too, this is another category that takes a lot of time and a lot of diligence going through it and critiquing it and cross-checking it and comparing it. And
Yeah, and
I'm sure it's been a number of years since ours has been revised. When was the last time?
Oh my. Yeah.
Quite a while ago.
Well, I hate to even admit that was like when I got here is like we've got to get this zoning ordinance rewritten. So yeah, it is quite an undertaking. I mean, it's I think that's another reason why to leave the hearing open a little bit. I did talk with Susan Fornish, who kind of is the executive assistant to the Home Builders Association's like community group, and so she usually reads through these codes pretty specifically and brings questions and comments back to the Home Builders Board. Cedar Rapids is right in the middle of a major. What they're doing is they're just taking their entire code, rewriting the entire thing, and then they're going to adopt it all at once. And I talked to her today, just said, hey, did you get a chance to look at that? And she said she hasn't looked at it, and that she's in the middle of Cedar Rapids. She's got like 12 pages of notes and questions, and so that's where they're kind of at. I do go to the Home Builders Association meetings. They meet monthly, and they talk about certain issues and specific items and ask questions. And so I told them what was going on. They've got a link to the documents. They've been provided everything you have on this at this point. So there may be some folks that do show up on Thursday.
So Thursday, you're just looking to, are we just setting the date for the public hearing, or you're
There is a
actually
public
asking?
hearing, so we'll open a public hearing, and I would just ask that be continued. And then we'll
So
just
we
place
would-
it on the next agenda, and there won't be any action on Thursday regarding the ordinance to adopt.
Okay, so we will open it. We are proposing that we will open it then on the 8th and then resume it on the 22nd.
Yeah, you just don't close it.
Just don't gavel and close it.
Say this hearing will remain open until the following meeting.
How do all these changes, out of curiosity, most of us have all received communication about tobacco use, smoke shops, those types of things, about keeping those out of the uptown area.
Mm-hmm.
How does these changes, definitions, impact any of that discussion or options?
So if you turn to the area where it says establishment of districts and map, that was one of the larger.
Yeah.
And if you go to, actually, that'll be covered in the. That'll be covered in the Central Corridor zoning district classification.
Okay.
So that'll be a separate. Yep.
All right,
Future
very
deal. We're working on that. I don't know. I don't recall right offhand how that was being approached, but it's similar to a liquor shop or a liquor store. I mean, we've all seen where a liquor store was done well, and we've all seen where a liquor store is done not so well.
Right.
And so how do you define that, and how do you regulate which one's which? So do you just take it out of all your districts and not have it? So there's a lot of considerations that it need to go into when you're making a decision on whether it should be or shouldn't be allowed in a specific district.
We'll have that discussion in the future?
Yep.
Very good.
Yep. I did want to just walk through the one on nonconformities, and I think this one's a little easier to kind of get your hands around. Our current code is in the black, so this is the 176.33. Our current code is in the black. The proposed changes are in the blue. I hope yours was color. I think it was.
Yes.
One of the problems we've had over the years is we have not been able to define a non-conforming lot. So if you have a lot that doesn't meet the standards, it just wasn't addressed. The final part of this code change, you'll see there's a page and a half of blue. I believe it's about a page and a half. that's all relative to a non-conforming lot, which is good that we have that, and provides us some direction as we move forward with if someone comes in and wants to do something with a lot that's non-conforming to the zoning code. Other than that, a lot of this is just simplifying the language. There are some additional provisions that are provided, burden of the property owner to establish the legality. So if their property is identified as a legal nonconforming, let me start out with, everybody understand what a legal nonconforming use is. So when the zoning district is changed and you're an insurance shop and it's supposed to be residential, you get to be insurance in perpetuity unless that insurance shop goes away or is abandoned, someone closes the doors. And under the current code, if it's over for 180 days, 6 months, then no one else can come in and open an insurance shop, and it's got to be residential. So that's how a legal nonconformity becomes null and void, and you got to be a legal use. This is used in areas, and I'll just tell it like it is, Fifth Avenue. We want to see that whole area develop without manufacturing and wholesale businesses on 5th and 6th. We got a new corridor. We want to see higher density residential, some commercial on the north side of 6th. Well, over time, those uses are transition. The property values are going to go up. So if someone has a car repair shop and they close the doors and it's closed for 6 months, but boy, in the 8th month, someone comes in and wants to open Bob's car repair shop, the answer to that's going to be no, because you've lost you are no longer a legal nonconformity. Your nonconformity status just went away. The only thing that property will be used for is what's consistent with whatever zoning is in place. So I don't want that to be I want that just everybody understands. And when we go to rezone property, that's when that conversation will happen. I can assure you there'll be people that'll be very upset with how that plays out.
But that will be painted with a broad brush of like categories, though, right? Whether it's retail, service.
Well, you'll have a zoning district that has a list of uses, like on the final pages. If you are in a commercial district, it'll identify the uses that are available to you on the property. So there may be areas where there's light manufacturing or APC Emirates site. They were doing light metal fabrication. That property will likely be rezoned to something high-density residential. So we would want that to go away. So we wouldn't want to see any more of the industrial uses in that area. Now, if APC Emirate was still there, they can continue to be there for as long as they want.
I mean, the rezoning is going to allow the grandfathering.
Correct. Barnes Manufacturing is a good example. They are a legal non-conforming use in their property. Yep.
Tom, is there
he
anything
does not like that, but I that was before my time.
Anything in here that would have prevented the storage garages built out on the highway that we turned down an apartment building, and then they went in and built storage garages on a piece of commercial property out by the Knights of Columbus. We would have liked for them not to have done that.
Yeah. So if I'll try to give you a page here. We are trying to limit the storage garages, mini warehouse, whatever you want to call them, into the industrial areas.
Okay.
We did identify that in a regional business district, which would be Highway 100, 151, 13 area, that if there are
I have to get some help reading these maps.
we were going to allow the mini warehouse if there was an office. So as an example, the one that you referenced, I think, in the past down in Tiffin, where when you drive by it, there's an office, there's a retail sales establishment, there's someone in there, it's got hours of operation. That would be
Yeah.
something you could put in a commercial district. If it's just a gate with a lock on it, that goes in an industrial district. And I just, that's from a planning perspective, I think that just makes sense.
Good. The other question I had was under damaged or destructed. And
Yep.
you talk about 50%, not mine, but most of Randy's company would argue that it may be more than that damage because insurance companies are really good at insuring the replacement anymore on homeowners. And I was wondering, in that section, would have that allowed the city to have done something to the Jiffy Lube site if they didn't do something within a year after that fell down? It would appear it does. That definitely is more than 50% damage.
Yeah, and this is only in the event that if it's a legal non-conforming use. So let's say that was a scrap metal or a metal fabricator on the site, and the
Who knew
building
what it
fell
was?
down.
Yeah.
They would have to remove it and put in a commercial use.
Okay.
Yep. And this just spells out the parameters upon which that, because you can imagine if it was, let's say there was just a fire in the back half of the building. The concept is from a zoning perspective that use should go away. We want to see something new. So there may be pressure on this from the city's perspective. Say, no, it's damaged beyond repair, and we want it to go away, so you got to put something in there that's commercial. Well, the property owner is going to say, no, this is my business. It's a viable operation. I want it to continue. This is my investment. This just spells out how that moves forward so that there's a determination of that value. And I think that's important for both parties, because otherwise it just goes straight to court, and then you got a battle.
What we end up with anymore is property insured far greater than the replacement, or pardon me, than the sales value of it.
Yep.
So it depends which value you're using,
And this one, I think the ultimate key on this one is that they spell out a process. It's based on an appraisal. And then there is a provision in there, unless otherwise, an alternative method determined acceptable by the city council. So let's say it's a historic building.
Yeah.
And it's a legal non-conforming use. Someone comes in and says, hey, we want to keep this, that's fine, we'll leave it alone. So the council can make that determination. And then the last part, unless there's questions on the nonconformities, this is just where we get into the districts and the district regs and the uses. I would spend some time just looking through the use standards and the concept of the tobacco shops and where they're located. We're trying to broad brush the community here, and the areas of the town where you'll see the BR, the regional business, community business, and the local business districts. So your neighborhood commercial would be your local business. Community business, again, would be like the Tower Terrace Road areas. Some of the Grand Avenue area, and then regional would be Highway 100, 151. So on Thursday, I would likely not make much of a presentation and then just allow public comment. If between now and the next meeting there is a desire from the council to hear a little bit more, or me to walk through this in more detail, or to have a formal presentation, I can do that. Just let me know. I can tell you that most of what's going to happen is when we get the code provisions adopted and we go into a neighborhood and we rezone property. That's when any glaring things are going to come out of a code rewrite. I will say I've been to many sessions on zoning ordinance adoption. There's 100 different ways to do it. I don't think any of them work 100% the first time. And most of the zoning administrators that stand in front of the groups and talk to it about, there will be issues, and we will likely be back in 6 months after to make tweaks and changes to the code. And just so the council's, just because it's written here, that doesn't mean that staff is just like, this is the way it's got to be. There will be mistakes when you're writing this much code, And so understand that as we move forward, and we'll try to work through to accommodate in areas where we can. One provision that is allowed within the zoning code is an interpretation. So sometimes that's an area where we can use that interpretation to move things along if there are major hurdles that we're trying to avoid. So.
Tom, the third-party organization that's also reviewing this, will we see any changes or slight tweaks to this before it actually comes before us on Thursday?
Not before Thursday, do I suspect.
Okay.
Maybe before the next meeting. I did ask Susan if she could just kind of get some preliminary feedback. That'd be great.
Okay, great.
So, anyway.
Any other questions on that category?
Oh, I'm not done. I'm sorry. There's more items.
Nope, that's okay. No, go right ahead. I just didn't know if there was anything on that particular one.
Item number 20 is the preliminary site development plan for Blue Blue Square, as the council had brought that back for reconsideration. I don't have the document, but David indicated today that he did receive an email from Mr. High withdrawing his proposal for that project, and so we'll receive and file that on Thursday, and that will not be up for consideration if that's, well, I guess it's probably got to be on the agenda because the council directed it to be on there, but so we'll figure that out between now and then. And so I don't have to continue to talk for very much longer. Kesha, do you want to provide an update on the Safe Routes to School Trail?
Just look into this one here quick. There's one up here.
Why are you guys so concerned about nursing homes? Are you going into one soon? You want it to be named something?
Go, bud, go. Got it.
Thinking about moving into one?
Thinking about coming back Thursday?
He won't visit you anyway.
There we go. Okay, just wanted to give you a brief update on Safe Routes to School Trail. Just to recap, in February we applied for funds. In May we were awarded, and they said, oh, by the way, you have to come up with 50% funding. That I'm not quite sure that we fully grasped when we wrote the grant, but nonetheless, they challenge accepted. Let's see where we can go. We're not fully committed to this. It's if we can raise the funds to be the matching part, we get $97,000 towards a trail in the Marion Independent School District. And so this is going to be really brief. This is basically the nuts and bolts of the trail. So you've got Vernon Middle School up in the northwest section of this. South 15th is that purple line that goes down, connects Starry and the high school. And then you've got First Avenue going to the east that connects to FMI. So that's the intent, is to have a side path in the right-of-way, in the city-owned right-of-way, to create that corridor for students. And so that northwestern portion is what we're gearing towards as a first segment to get installed. And so what we have is, again, over on the left, you can see that the Walmart grant for 97, it's actually more than 97,000, but just rough figures. But so what our portion is more than 80 or more 48,000. And so what we've got so far is the Marion Independent School Board has committed $10,000 towards this. And at this point, we don't need cash in hand. It's just those commitments to fund the project. And then we've also gotten Delta Dental to commit $10,000 towards this project as well. And so we're pretty excited about those. So what we have in commitments is $20,000 so far. We did ask the Lynn County Economic Development Fund for $15,000. They're going into, I believe they have it as a discussion item tomorrow. We're supposed to hear mid-August was the feedback on that originally. And then also the Lynn County Realtors Association. And there's a couple other organizations out there or businesses out there that we have requested that either we haven't heard back from or that we've heard back from, but it's just an odd timing in their fiscal year to do these things. So we're kind of making out of norm requests for this. And so what we have in non-commitments, but optimistically, is that 19,000. So that puts us at 39, just, having that gap of 10,000. So I just wanted to update the council. We're not necessarily talking dollars and cents of what Marion's commitment could be. The deadline for getting back to Wellmark is the 24th, so conveniently we have a city council meeting on the 23rd that we'll be bringing this back. So we'd like to get all the other players involved, all the other monies in this before we come back to the city council to actually talk about Marion's commitment into this. And so I would like to know that we are having our engineering department do the design, and so it's not that we're just getting this freely without work put into it as well. Yeah, we've talked about it. Don't worry, Mike. So basically that's just myself and Chad Strudsky are just kind of the contact people for city and the school district. Rachel Schramm with Lynn County Public Health has been a wealth of information, a wealth of help for this. Sarah Menser with the YMCA, she also helps with our Be Well Marion. She's also been an awesome support person for this. Any questions on this? This is just meant to be an update. Again,
Very exciting. Those are some huge numbers. Those are some huge numbers to come in.
Since June, yeah. So, I mean, this is the turnaround time of the award in May, bring it to council in June, and then to turn around those. So we're pretty excited about when we heard about Delta Dental, that we're just like,
that's a nice surprise.
We could do this.
Yeah, Delta Dental doesn't, those are big numbers.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yep. And so next up, if there's no questions, I'll skip right into Master Trails Plan.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this is Master Trails Plan. This is just a map that is integrated into the plan. What this map does is it shows all of our potential routes that we would ideally like to build in the next 20, 30 years. And so the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee met and they discussed potential connections in the network that could be made. Again, we're not redoing the entire map. We're just looking at these small scale connections that could be made that could help improve, that could help improve the network. And the first one here is South 22nd Street. Actually, it's 22nd Street. From 3rd Avenue up to 6th Avenue. And so it's just that connection that once 6th Avenue, once 22nd Street connects into 6th Avenue, it's just continuing those bike lanes up to, or bike boulevards up to where the bike lanes are and where the side paths are. So it's just identifying those on there. Again, it gives our public service clear direction. This is our plan, going forward, painting those in there. The caveat with this one is that 5th Avenue and 22nd Street is punched through. If there is no stop sign warranted, if there's no stop sign in this location, we would not want that crossing of that. If 5th Avenue has that right away there, that could be a little tricky just depending on the traffic on 5th Avenue. So that's one of the cautionary items that we had for that one. Another recommendation is a north-south collector between Alburnett Road and North 10th Street. So you've got the paralleling north-south streets there. Eventually there would be, based on our major streets plan, there's a collector in between there that would carry the traffic in between the two arterials. And so just putting it on a map, so if the developer comes in, this doesn't work on this. Oh, quick. So if the developer comes in on the east side of that Echo Hill development up by the water storage tank, that they want to start going gangbusters, well, how do we ask them to dedicate their roads with side paths and bike lanes if we don't have it on our map ourselves? So just, again, simple addition, nothing we know coming down the pipeline, but This one is putting the Safe Routes to School trail on there. When we adopted the map in 2014, prior to the Safe Routes to School, we were trying to work with what we had, again, trying to work with a lot of on-street accommodations. And so what you'll see is that solid dark blue line is just the bike lane on South 15th. And then you've got bike boulevards and charros being painted there too. So again, this is just incorporating the side path to connect the schools. And then you'll notice also there's that connection on First Avenue over to FMI, again, side path in the right of way. And then the final recommendation of BPAC would be First Avenue. And so you notice the last one took us to FMI. That completes that Safe Routes to School trail that was recommended and adopted by council. This one actually takes it a step further. So this is that reach that works towards connecting those gaps. If we're going to do the Safe Routes to School trail, why not do over to 31st Street where there's an existing side path, and just again make that connection so it doesn't look awkward that you have a trail just stopping in the middle of First Avenue. So that is all I have for that. Any questions?
Well, nothing?
No.
Thank you very much, Kesha.
So,
Excellent information. It's nice to have some of those areas where we have some of that stuff identified before we get to that point.
Wake up, Tom.
The only other item under planning was the request from Terrace Hill to defer sidewalks along Alburnett Road, Terrace Glen, my apologies, associated with the new development group out to Alburnett Road. There's a requirement with this project that their sidewalks go in with any other final plat. They've made a request to defer that. The staff has looked at it. There's likelihood that development could occur to the north. In addition, you see what happens in the last few meetings with deferrals. We just really like to be able to get the improvements in as a part of this, and so we're recommending denial of a full deferral, but for a partial, the topography at the south end gets kind of dicey, so ultimately we would defer that portion of it, so at least there's some portion of that in, and then ultimately when an Alburnett Road would ever expand or get readdressed there, the sidewalk would likely go up and along the west side and continue to the south. So
you're recommending that they should put in part of it?
Yep.
And defer part?
Yep. Just because the topography is such that if you took it to the south property line, you'd tear out a bunch of trees and it'd be quite a bit of work.
Expensive.
Yep. Yep.
I'll go back to the other one. What would be the benefit of doing only part of that then? Because there's no development on that side, you're not going to be doing the whole piece, so
yeah.
I mean, if you're going to do a partial deferral,
yeah,
not a full deferral on that section.
We're only deferring, I want to say it's like 50 or 70 feet on the south. There's like 400 feet that we're making them do.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's...
As it's developed, he'd probably want someone to pay for that.
The area to the south, Steve, is already developed. There's large lot residential that backs up to that area. As you go further north, you've got one farmstead, but you're also going to have the next extension of Tower Terrace Road extending over to C. So when that area starts to develop, Scenic will actually have a sidewalk up to the side paths along Tower Terrace Road. As you go south, there aren't sidewalks along East Robbins. The next major road that actually has sidewalks is 33rd Avenue and then 29th Avenue. So going north, they're actually going to be connecting into a piece that gets them into more of the regional trails network, gives them direct access over into Gill Park and into Lau Park. It just made more sense to continue it north.
Okay, I'll have to drive out there and look at it. I've not looked at that one.
Is the sidewalk going in at the farmstead?
No.
Not yet, but
So
as
just this
development in
red
that
line.
area occurs, it's likely that there would be one put in.
Any other questions for Tom? If not, thank you, Tom.
He refuses to leave.
Sorry. I'm just trying to organize.
No more.
I think he's frozen up there.
Close.
This takes us to administration. Lon.
The first item we're actually going to remove from the agenda for Thursday. We'd hoped to have the draft have time for Genesis to review it and provide comments back before council acted on it, but we haven't had it long enough. We have a call with the attorneys ourselves to have a couple more revisions, and then we'll need some time for Genesis to review it. Overall, the structure is what I had talked with the council about before, where we'd be making a capital contribution to each section of the project, where you have the residential piece, you have the commercial piece, and then an overall limitation on our contribution. The math works out that it's 36.85%. Our contribution on the hotel was 36%, so we're right in line numerically with what we've done for other projects along the central corridor. That's more on the percentage is higher on the commercial in isolation, but lower on the residential in isolation, but the blended comes in at right 36.85. So as soon as we have a chance to look at that a little bit more, we'll get it to council. We'll make sure that you have the draft in your hands before the end of this week, so you have plenty of time to review it before we bring it back for consideration and approval.
Any questions?
On number 2, the Freund Vector Corporation had been in front of the City Council proposing a project where they were looking at building a new facility out in the Marion Enterprise Center for their R&D portion of it. They've since scaled that back and have worked through a process with the state to change their quality jobs program application to reflect the new project. It does still require match. IEDA has amended the contract, but we need to designate who locally can sign that contract for the city. So we just wanted to do a resolution to designate that the mayor and the mayor pro tem are authorized to sign the contract and actually any other documents related to the Freund Vector project with IEDA. The third one is a little bit of a different tack. When businesses apply to the state for assistance from the High Quality Jobs Program, municipal assistance, local assistance is required. And with the original project, they were going to build it through the MEC. They were going to be able to count the MEC's write-down of lot prices towards the community match. Now that they're going to the existing site, that's no longer an option. So the match requirement for the community kicks in. We do have an existing development agreement with Freund from their last expansion about 4 years ago. And rather than going through the process of doing a whole new one tied to this grant, it would be a lot more expedient to just amend our existing one and add a couple of years to it. Then we've got the community match requirement met. So we're just seeking direction from the council rather than going through everything, a whole new development agreement, all of that. We would just, you'd be directing us to amend the existing one to add those new years to it. I think it worked out that it was 2 more years and then we were done.
Are you looking for direction then this evening, Lon, on that?
We have a motion on there for Thursday.
Okay.
To direct the staff to do that. Number 4 is an amended services agreement with Involta. As we've been moving forward with our changes to IT, we've been moving away from hosting our own servers and our own architecture into a contract for service model. This is to support the GIS system, not only at the police department, but citywide. It'll prevent us from having to buy additional storage of our own that has to go into our replacement schedule and additional servers of our own. Essentially, with what Involta can provide for the dollars that they charge for it, we can't buy it as cheap as they can, and we can't buy the quality of the equipment or guarantee the uptime that they can. So overall, when Terrell did the analysis on it, the initial contract 3 years ago, we were already saving money, and it's since gotten cheaper with the last contract that we approved. Any questions on that? Then number 10 is receive and file and discuss. Obviously, the City Council received copies of correspondence from Gary Hughes concerning a tree over on 8th Avenue near 7th Street. Just wanted to see if the City Council had any questions, concerns, if you wanted us to carry that forward. At this point, the only option that I would see that would be available would be to refer it over to TAC. I think as Council saw when I had CC'd my response to Mr. Hughes to the entire City Council before this happened, because the way this was developing, I had a feeling that this might happen. We've got a couple $1,000s worth of staff time invested in this issue already. It's kind of moved beyond the issue of the tree into other issues, and I just didn't know if the council wanted any follow-up on it or if you had any particular direction related to it.
So one option is just to refer that to TAC.
If you wanted to refer it to TAC, I think that's the only option left, because the departments that, I think there's only maybe one department that hasn't reviewed it that's on TAC. All of the other ones have.
Yeah, basically it'd be police and fire giving us their input. Engineering has met with Parks. We went over this issue with them as well, so we've gone over the site triangle stuff. If you wanted to go by his standard, just to give you an idea, pretty much all the trees on Pucker Street would have to be taken down.
I mean, there's examples of this throughout the entire city, too.
And it's one of those things that if we were to follow the standard that he's suggesting, all of our light poles in the uptown would now qualify as visual obstructions. As Mike has said, almost the entirety of Pucker Street would have to have the trees removed. A lot of the older section of town, you'd just be doing wholesale tree removals to comply with that.
Make them all existing non-conforming and write new rules for the future. That's the easy way to do it.
Do you want us to put it on there for a discussion item or a direction?
I don't
think so.
I don't believe so. No.
Okay.
No.
No.
All right. That's all I have.
All right. Well, we were scheduled till 7:05, so Councilman Draper, we're ahead of schedule. Thank you for everyone for allowing me to play the third string quarterback.
Excellent job.
We would like to also keep the Aguilasli family in our thoughts and prayers. And we should have a fuller council on Thursday. So thank you for your patience. Thanks for coming. We're adjourned.